figured today was a good day for a little bit of an update on our American buff geese. We, I don't know, a month ago or so, I forget exactly the date, but we got them set up into their breeding groups, and this is kind of just a little bit of an update on how things are going between the three pairs. So the first one I'm going to let out this morning is Samson and his lady, and we'll show you what they've got going on. There we go, we'll let these guys out. Sounds like they would like out. Oh, everybody's ready to come out for today. This pair has a great nest, and I checked the other day, there's 7 eggs in there, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's more than enough, and she's been a great mom. This pair has even thwarted some close encounters with a local raven. Here we're hopeful that we're going to get some goslings out of this group. So one thing we'll say about geese, and she's going back to her nest already from the looks of it, is aside from the noise, they do get a bad rap as being aggressive. And there is obviously some truth to that, but it really comes down to their biology. And we say this all the time, as you see Samson kind of giving me the eye. Essentially in the springtime, they're basically hardwired for that. Even she's a little on the hissy side. And it makes perfect sense because geese in the wild tend to nest fairly in the open. And there they go. So the aggression factor does make sense when you think of where geese often nest. Relatively speaking, they're pretty exposed, and that exposes them to a lot of predators. There's another side to it, with ganders in particular. They often get a little more aggressive early in the egg laying period because they're trying to keep other males away, so that it essentially ensures the offspring they're about to invest time and effort in raising and protecting are actually theirs. So that's sort of a really just hitting the iceberg on I guess the biological reasons why geese are aggressive. Now, that being said, some geese can become overly aggressive pretty much any time of year, and I mean, look at your breed that you're keeping and such, but in those cases, those would be ganders or geese we would not keep in a breeding group. But when it gets to the springtime, and especially here where they have eggs and they have the nest, I mean, you heard you saw and heard that both of them were hissing and posturing and all that sort of stuff. But they're not nasty. That's just their way of saying don't get too close. The big thing is make sure you're managing them that way, that you kind of respect that during the periods when they are that way, for lack of a better way to put it, and you really reduce some of your issues, i.e. we don't let the kids go in with Samson this time of year because we know that's a disaster waiting to happen. We have another gander who's completely different, but we'll take you to the other pairs that we have and kind of continue this tale of how they're doing with their nesting endeavors, and just some discussion on aggressiveness in geese, domestic geese. So on the topic of sort of goose aggression, because this comes up a lot, that a lot of people have memories of horrible geese that terrorize them in their childhood, or for horrible farm geese. I think it's a valid concern for people to have, but kind of like what I said with the first pair, it's learning how to manage it, because it's not. I mean, it can develop to that. It's knowing where the difference is. If you have a goose that's aggressive year-round, and you have a breeding program, I would potentially suggest that may not be a goose you want to keep. That being said, you have to understand the degree of aggression. A little bit of hissing and some posturing is one thing. Full-on attacking people in the off-season when they're not breeding, that's kind of another. It's kind of like roosters. It's just behavior you probably don't want to tolerate. So on the flip side, when the geese are in their breeding season, it's having that understanding that they're still doing what basically comes natural to them. It's no different than rams hitting things with their horns or bulls being bulls. That animal is doing what it naturally was developed to do, which is protect not only its eggs from predators, but also protect its female from interlopers, which really are the two biggest reasons why geese get that way in the spring. So just something to keep in mind, and I feel all too often geese are passed over because of that aggressive reputation without really understanding the motivations or what to look for, or even how to avoid getting into a situation that just is not pleasant for everybody involved. So anyway, some food for thought. We may come back to that, but let's go take a look at some of the other geese we've got and where they're at. All right, well, we're in the barn, so I apologize if this is a bit dark, but here is our other pair of geese, and she is doing an amazing job. And this pair is actually quite human friendly, we'll put it that way. This gander, who I'm going to let out here in a second, doesn't have any problem with people, and it's actually quite pleasant. But he still seems aware enough about predators and that sort of thing that he does give it a try. But this girl, last that we checked, because we haven't actually checked in a little bit, she has 11 eggs. So I'm going to go ahead, and I think you are standing right down here and would probably really like out. So he has a tendency to just hang out in front of the barn, and these two are very friendly compared to any of the other geese we have as far as people go, and which is quite nice. But we are glad that we have them in the barn because it gives them an extra bit of protection. Oh, I know you want to go that way, but we've got you locked out because of the sheep. But anyways, she has been doing an amazing job, and you can see her incubating there. Now if I go in there, she gets a little bit upset, but as long as I give her her space, she's pretty good. This pair is really quite friendly, and like I say, there still is a bit of a desire to ward off sort of like aerial predators and that sort of thing. But I'll take you back and we'll talk about the last pair, because while we have two pairs of geese sitting, the third pair has not been so successful. Well, the pair that we had in this pen that we built this spring hasn't been as successful as the other two pairs. What actually happened was a raven figured out there was eggs in there, and this pair, how do I put it, didn't really stand up to the raven. Now that's an error both on our part and in some ways their part. The gander in this particular pair is very much all talk and very little follow through, even though he's the biggest of the ganders that we have. So that's just something to consider with geese. They're sometimes touted as being a little more predator proof than other birds, and it's very true, but it's not, they're not indestructible. And so what we've essentially done is, just because of some other shuffling for other reasons, we've moved them to a different pen. The raven got 5 of the goose eggs, and of course geese are not as prolific as chickens, so potentially that's a bit of a setback, but we're curious to see this hen hasn't been laying as well. So there may be some other factors going on there that we may end up selecting against over time, but we will sort of see how that goes. There's some lessons learned here. I mean, I guess the first one is, yes, geese are more predator proof than other birds, for sure, simply because of their size, but they're not immune to predation. So if you're getting into any breed of goose, keep that in mind. You still have to obviously protect them from predators. Now, in the case of the raven, what we basically have decided is that this is kind of a 50-50 our issue and the geese. The goose part, like I say, they didn't stand up to the raven whatsoever, and it's not exactly the biggest and most nasty, scary predator out there, although definitely able to outsmart a goose if it wants to. But on our error here, what we're going to do in the future is, for any of our goose breeding pens, is while they're collecting eggs, leave the door shut during the day. And so let them out in the morning, let them go do their thing, because that's what geese are great for, is being grazers. They're the original pastured poultry. While they're out doing that, close the door so that nothing can come and get the eggs, because that just reduces that temptation. And essentially not open the door again until later in the afternoon as we get closer to time for them to go back in. What we found with the pair in the barn, that didn't affect her at all. She just kind of changed to the routine, and it worked really well, actually. And I mean, she's the one that has the most eggs. She's got 11, so she had no problem with it, got really into the routine. And that's one thing about geese. Chickens do it too, but it's maybe a little harder to see. But geese are kind of all individuals. They're all a little bit different, a little bit quirky, and they learn. Well, birds are more intelligent than people give them credit for sometimes. But geese definitely learn patterns and recognize things that maybe other birds don't seem to. So it didn't take long to get her into that routine. But I'm going to go and let out the third pair, and we'll show you kind of where they're set up now. Quick stop at the pig pen here, and you can see Samson. This has been his post. So while his girl is sitting, he basically spends the day sitting here. It's the highest point in the pen, and he can see everything that goes on. I mean, he does wander off every now and then to eat something, but for the most part, he stays put up here, and we've even seen him in action with the raven where he put the run on it. So, well, here's the third pair, and they are back in basically where the sheep have been for where the sheep have been for most of the spring. Now, from a goose perspective, there is still quite a bit of food out here. Basically, after the incident, we decided to move them because she did not seem too keen about going back into the coop where she lost all of her eggs. So we've basically set up another nest, and I've got to add a little bit of material to that because I just did that this morning, in all fairness. And this is where we had a group of chickens in here at one point. Essentially what we're going to do is, like I said, leave the door shut for the day. She hasn't laid anything since coming over here at all, so we'll see how that goes. But leave the door shut, and that keeps both sheep and ravens out. And then when she gets to the point of sitting, as you can see from the other geese, it really, the behavior changes. They don't go too far from the nest, and they're a lot more protective of it. Well, that's kind of the brief, I guess, look at where we're at with the geese. We have two pairs that are both incubating eggs. So we've got 7 under one and 11 under the other. So really looking forward to getting some goslings here. It should be, I forget the exact dates, we've got it written down, but we should be pretty much the end of May-ish by the time we get there. Or maybe like second last week before we get goslings, but that's great. And we'll see on this third pair, like I said, she's pretty much stopped laying. So if she doesn't lay, then we're not going to get any goslings out of them, and we'll have some discussion on some next steps here. Overall, still would say that for the amount of effort involved, geese are, if you have the space, that's the big caveat. If you have the space, geese are a very easy, large type of poultry to keep and manage, and we're pretty much to the point now that we're feeding these geese very, very little, because even when we do feed them the grains, we've actually stopped because when we were offering it, they weren't even eating it. They were totally preferring to eat grass, which makes sense. We're in spring. It's in an excellent state for them, and that really is probably the biggest plus for geese, is you are talking about a poultry species that really can sustain itself off of almost completely grass. And we're really looking forward to following through the progress on goslings when they come, and sort of that experience. So stay tuned.